Good morning, students. Today we will start the next life process, that is respiration. Respiration is oxidation of food and release of energy. It is very important for all living beings. We know that after digestion, the food is available in its simple soluble form and it is absorbed by the blood. Via blood, it reaches the cell. Same way, from the respiratory system, the oxygen also which we inhale goes to the cell. So, cell is the destination for oxygen which comes from the respiratory system, and food in its simple form, that is soluble form, comes from the digestive system to the cell via blood. In cell, now next step will be the cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is oxidation of food and release of energy. Now in cell, a very important chemical reaction will happen, that is glucose plus oxygen, C6H12O6 plus oxygen will give rise to carbon dioxide, water, and a lot of energy will be released. The reaction is like this, that is C6H12O6, this is glucose. You said burning of the food, so food is in glucose form, burning of food with the help of oxygen. So this burning of food is also known as oxidation of food. It gives rise to a lot of carbon dioxide which we exhale out, plus some water vapor and a lot of energy in the form of ATP. ATP is the energy currency. So this is a chemical equation which represent cellular respiration. This chemical reaction happens inside the cell, and I told you how the food has reached to the cell via blood from the digestive system, and how the oxygen has reached to the cell, that is via blood. Via means through blood from the respiratory system. So we know energy is released in the form of ATP. Now moving ahead, we will see the passage of the air in human respiratory system. Air moves through nasal cavity from nostril. It enters through nostril, then it goes to nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is also known as the nasal passage. So it moves from nostril, then it goes to the nasal cavity, then it comes to the pharynx. Pharynx is said to be the common passage which is present in your respiratory system as well as in your digestive system. From here, the diversion of food water happens to the food pipe and air goes to the windpipe. Then air comes to the larynx, that is also called voice box. It is also called voice box. Then it comes to trachea. Trachea is commonly called windpipe. Then trachea gets divided into two bronchi. Bronchi is plural and its singular will be bronchus. This is the singular form, and because the trachea windpipe gets divided into two, so these two are known as bronchi. Singular, it is called bronchus. Now bronchi gets inside the lungs and it gets further branched into finer tube-like structure called bronchioles. Ultimately, it terminates or end up as a balloon-like structure called alveoli. Main respiratory organ of human being is lungs. That's why we are said to have the pulmonary respiration. Respiratory system of man is in thoracic cavity, that is also known as chest cavity. Thoracic cavity is commonly called chest cavity. So the upper portion of the body, that is chest cavity, is called thoracic cavity, and our respiratory system lies here. Lungs are protected in rib cage. Rib cage is a part of your skeletal system, and we know skeletal system is for support and protection to the body. Now through this diagram, I will try to explain the passage of the air to you. Look at the diagram carefully. This is the nostril. Air enters through the nostril. Then it comes to the nasal passage. Then from the nasal passage, it comes to the pharynx. Pharynx is the common passage which is present in your digestive system also. Just imagine that, for example, this man is having food from its mouth, that is oral cavity. Then food comes here to the food and water comes to the pharynx, and air from the nasal passage comes to the pharynx. So pharynx is the common passage. Now the food and water will move to the food pipe and wind will go to the windpipe. From here there are two pipes. One is food pipe. Food and water will go to the food pipe and wind will go to the windpipe. So till pharynx, pharynx is having a funnel shaped structure, and air, water and food, all three come here. Then there is division and diversion of food and water to the food pipe, and wind goes to the windpipe. That's why sometimes they ask 1 mark question, name the common passage which is present in digestive system as well as your respiratory system. So answer will be pharynx. Then moving ahead, the air comes to the larynx. Larynx is known as the voice box. In the voice box, for example, this is the pharynx which is funnel shaped. Now there is a small hole which is known as glottis, and air enters through this opening called glottis, which is covered by a flap like structure called epiglottis. Now the air comes to windpipe, that is trachea. From this trachea, you can see there are some cartilaginous C-shaped structures like this, half ringed C-shaped structures like this, protecting the trachea, so that when there is no air in windpipe, the windpipe do not get collapsed. So these cartilaginous rings, they give strength to the windpipe. Then this windpipe gets divided into bronchi. I told you bronchi is plural, singular will be bronchus. Then it gets inside the lungs. It gets further divided into bronchioles. Here they have not shown you the bronchioles, that this bronchi gets divided into bronchioles. At the end of the bronchiole, there are a bunch of balloon-like structure which is known as alveoli. And alveolus, and plural of alveolus is alveoli. Alveoli is the site of exchange of gases. So as I gave you the brief description of respiratory system, today we will study about 3 parts of respiratory system. One is nasal cavity, then pharynx, and then larynx. Remaining topics we will discuss in later classes. First is nasal cavity. We know air enters through the nostrils and goes to the nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is also known as nasal passage. In nasal passage, many things happen. Air which we inhale gets warm, filtered and moist here. Warm, why the air gets warm? Because of the presence of capillaries, blood capillaries, very fine blood capillaries which are having warm blood. So because of warm blood, when the air comes in contact of that warm blood, then it also gets warm. So we can feel that warmth of the air. Then in the nasal passage, air also gets filtered, because in nasal passage many hair like structures are there which trap the dust particle and germs. Then it also gets moist also because of the presence of mucus in the nasal cavity. So this is the significance of nasal cavity, that when air enters to the nasal cavity, air gets warm, filtered and moist. Sometimes the question comes, why we should breathe through nose instead of breathing through mouth? So this is the significance, that when we breathe through our nose, then air gets filtered, it gets warm and moist. Then after coming from nasal cavity, it goes to the pharynx. Pharynx is said to be the common passage for respiration and digestive system. It is funnel shaped structure, and from oral cavity, that is mouth, the food and water comes, and from the nasal cavity the air comes. They all three, food, water and air, they get collected here and then they get diverted to their respective pipes. Food and water goes to food pipe and air goes to the windpipe. Larynx is the voice box. Larynx is the voice box. It is cartilaginous structure. Cartilaginous means it is made up of flexible cartilage. It is present at the opening of the trachea. How to learn the sequence? After nasal cavity, it is pharynx, then larynx, then trachea, palate, pharynx, larynx and trachea. So this larynx is present at the top of the trachea. Adam's apple, which we see in boys especially going through their adolescence phase. So Adam's apple is nothing but the protruding cartilage of larynx. Protruding means which comes out. You must have seen in boys which are going through their adolescence phase that their cartilage nearby their neck region comes out. It is quite visible there. So that is nothing but Adam's apple, and Adam's apple is the cartilage which comes out of the larynx. It is kind of an indication of the puberty attained. Larynx has two vocal cords to produce. Voice box inside has two vocal cords like this. Larynx has the two vocal cords inside. When air enters these two vocal cords, they vibrate, and we know sound is produced by the vibration. So this is the voice box, and they have two flaps of or two vocal cords which produces sound when they get vibrated. Thank you very much. Revise well.